Hey everybody, and welcome to part 10 of the Bible study series. Guys, we are in double digits of the study videos, which is incredible. We're making progress. I do know that these are taking, a lot of time. It's probably going to take 10 years to get through this Bible. But hey, it is certainly worth it. This takes a lot of time, so I appreciate your patience. I wish that I could do this with more frequency, but honestly, I don't have a lot of spare time, and this does take a lot of time to prepare and everything like that. So, and it's all in God's time. That's the best thing. I find myself where I get to a point where I'm trying to rush, and I start to get frustrated, and I'm trying to just get through things, and God, He will honestly, literally stop it. He will stop me in my tracks if I'm trying to rush through something, because He is literally making sure that everything that He is wanting you to hear and wanting me to pass along, that it's going to happen, that it's going to take place. Okay, and so when I get in a rush, uh, the craziest things happen, and it causes me to slow down or to completely stop. And what happens after that, on the other side of my frustration, is God meets me there, and He was waiting with something even more for me to discover in this Word. And it's just like, man, why do I ever try to just do things on my own time and right? Lord, I'm sorry. Yeah, you are right every single time. And so, hey, this is taking time, but this is taking His time, and we're just going along with it as He is given it. Okay, so we're making a lot of great progress in everything that's been taking place, and how this is shaping up. Meeting our guy Abram in the previous chapter and in the last video, and just what God is about to do through this man's life, the calling on his life, and all the works that are going to be done. It's incredible. It absolutely is. And yeah, at the end of verse 12, or in the end of chapter 12 there, we saw that, he's not a perfect person. Okay, Noah, we saw he was not a perfect person as well. Okay, but how God, continually works His divine plan, His perfect plan, is always the priority, and is going to come to fulfillment 100%. Okay, and God working in our lives, even in our own mistakes, in our misjudgments and everything like that, He still works with us and through us to perfect His plan and bring it about. And in such an amazing way. And here we go. In chapter 13, the story begins to expand, and we get into a little bit more. Okay, so as always, don't forget to pray before getting into this. And here we go, chapter 13. If you remember, near the end of chapter 12 there in the last video, we were talking about how Abram started to have a little blemish there, making a mistake, started losing some of that faith, in God, and fear started to creep in. And so he tries to kind of cover and secure things in his own way, in his own mind and everything, by covering up the truth and putting out a lie. And we saw kind of how all of that unfolded, and how essentially, though, God was still there. He was working everything, and literally put things in motion and in place to change that whole scenario and get things back on the right track, with Abram and his family and everything. So it is such an awesome thing. That goes to show that, we're not perfect. God does not use perfect people. He uses people that are willing to come into complete fellowship, have trust and faith in Him. But even in our moments when we lose that faith, and our imperfect nature begins to come out, God still covers us. He's still watching over us, using His hands and His Spirit to continually guide us towards His perfection, to do His perfect plan. And it will not be denied. And you guys are going to see that the rest of the way throughout the entire Bible. And again, it's incredible. So here we go. That happened. That took place. And so Abram, he left Egypt and started traveling north along with his family, also with Lot. Remember his younger nephew and everything that they hit on. So Pharaoh, kicked him out and said, "Man, get out of here." And so they went. Everything that they had accumulated, boom, here we go. They start going. And verse 2 of chapter 13 starts to kind of paint this picture. It says, Abram was very rich in livestock, silver, and gold. And then a few verses down in verse 5, it said, Lot, who was traveling with Abram, had also become very, very wealthy with flocks of sheep and goats, herds of cattle, and many, many tents. So these two guys, their wealth was becoming abundant. They had so much, that they were carrying along with them and everything, and wherever they began to settle, man, they had a lot of stuff. They had accumulated so much, and we got to know that obviously this was a divine thing. God was taking care of them. He was constantly lifting them up, even in the last scenario where Abram, was making that mistake and had a little bit of weakness there, how God still was able to use all of that. And in the process, Abram still gained even more than what he had before he went into Egypt and that whole encounter with Pharaoh, etc. So it's such an incredible thing how God continues to bless them and lift them up. And sometimes when things like that can happen, when we can accumulate, right, wealth and, think riches and things like that, all these things, something can start to creep in. And here's where we're going to see a little bit of that right now. So here we go in verse 6. It says, But the land could not support both Abram and Lot, with all their flocks and herds living so close together. And so disputes broke out between the herdsmen of Abram and Lot. Okay, and at that time it says the Canaanites and the Perizzites were also living in the land. So here we go. These two, Lot and Abram, they've accumulated so much, and with all of this comes the desire. There's jealousy. There might be some envy there. It's just conflict. Disputes are breaking out between the herdsmen, right, of Abram and the herdsmen of Lot. And so, it's starting to ruffle some feathers here and everything like that because of all the possessions and everything that was taking place. So evidently there was something going on with that. And look at the approach that Abram takes right here. Okay, so this quarreling, everything that was going on in verse 8, here we go. It says, Finally Abram said to Lot, Let's not allow this conflict to come between us or our herdsmen. Okay, so evidently this was bubbling up so much that it was starting to get, directly to Abram and Lot as well. So he said, let's not allow this conflict to come between us or our herdsmen. He says, after all, we're close relatives. All right, and he says, look, the whole countryside is open to you. Take your choice of any section of the land you want, and we will separate. If you want the land to the left, then I will take the land to the right. And if you prefer the land on the right, then I'll go to the left. So notice the wisdom here in that approach by Abram. The study Bible says Abram took the initiative in settling the dispute, right? This wasn't something, when he's talking about separating here, again, I love how it mentioned, and we might skip over this at the end of verse 7 there, where it says, at that time, Canaanites and Perizzites were also, it's not like parasites, but Perizzites were also living in the land. So again, they're surrounded by these foreign people, these foreign nation tribes, what you like to call them, and they're in hostile territory. So the last thing that Abram would want to happen is for their family, right, and everything to separate. That's the last thing that he wants. But he also knows that this type of conflict and everything that's going on can be even more detrimental to them and their safety and security, and following along with what God's plan is and everything. And so here in his wisdom, he says, Lot, look, hey, we're relatives. Look out at this countryside and everything. Look at this land, and you make a decision. You take your choice of land that you want. Okay, so like the study Bible says, it says how it kind of teaches us how to respond. It's such a great example for us to respond to difficult situations, especially when it comes to family. It says, one, take the initiative, right, in resolving the conflict. Step up and take the initiative. We should always be out to make things right, especially with our friends and especially with our family. And then two, let others have first choice, even if that means not getting what we want. Okay? And then three, put family peace above personal desires. So this is everything that Abram was doing here with such great wisdom and a peaceful, desire here. Okay, so in verse 10 it goes on, it says, Lot took a long look at the fertile plains of the Jordan Valley, right? The whole area was well watered everywhere, like the garden of the Lord, or the beautiful land of Egypt. Okay, and this was all before, Sodom and Gomorrah and everything. We're going to get to that a little bit later before the Lord destroys, that whole city and kingdom and everything that's going to go on. We'll find out why. So, verse 11, it says, Lot chose for himself the whole valley Jordan, the Jordan Valley to the east of them. And he went there with his flocks and servants and parted company with his uncle Abram. And so Abram settled in the land of Canaan, and Lot in the land around Sodom. Okay, so we know looking forward, like we just said, that this was all before eventually we get to the part where Sodom and Gomorrah are destroyed. So a little bit of foreshadowing again here. This area, it was not a good area. And what I mean by that, it was beautiful. It was absolutely beautiful and fertile and well watered and everything like that. So again, think about, through the eyes, seeing what looks so good and desirable, just like Satan did in chapter 3, and tempting Eve. She saw it, she desired it, it looked good, right? Oh, and making that type of choice. And we're going to come to find out that this place, this area, all of this was filled with just absolute wickedness, just wicked people to the nth degree and everything. Okay, so he's looking after, through his eyes, and here we go, he's just making that decision. And I love what the study Bible says here about Lot. It says Lot's character is revealed by his choices. He took the best share of the land, even though it meant living near Sodom, a city known for its sin. He was greedy, wanting the best for himself without thinking about Abram's needs or what was fair. Okay, so when we stop making choices in God's direction, our only option is to make choices in the wrong direction. And here we go. We're going to see right in the next chapter how all of this unfolds. Okay, so hang on tight. Okay, so there we go. Verse 12. So Abram settled in the land of Canaan, and Lot moved his tents to a place near Sodom and settled among that city. So it says there, following up in verse 13, but the people of this area were extremely wicked and constantly sinned against the Lord. Dum dum dum. This is setting up. This is setting up what's about to happen next already. Okay, so here we go. That's giving us a little bit of a picture. And check this out though. So with everything that man does, we always get a response from God, and this is such an awesome thing. When we start here in verse 14, it says, after Lot had gone, the Lord said to Abram, look as far as you can see in every direction, north and south, east and west. I am giving all this land, as far as you can see, to you and your descendants as a permanent possession. And I will give you so many descendants that, like the dust of the earth, they cannot be counted. So go and walk through the land in every direction, for I am giving it to you. Wow. So Abram moved his camp to Hebron and settled near the oak grove belonging to Mamre. And there he built another altar to the Lord. So, all right, let's take a step back real quick. Notice with this conflict within the family, with their wealth and possessions and everything, this was separating. Obviously, this isn't something that Abram wanted. It wasn't the wisest thing to take place, considering where they were and who they were surrounded by. But he took the high road with all of this, knowing what could come to the internal, right, disruption of this conflict and everything. And he lets Lot make a choice to go and separate from them. Abram, he was this wasn't, a great thing. He was probably not feeling so great about this. And look what the Lord does, is right after this happens, the Lord comes to him, right? And he comforts him. And look how he does it, right? Talking about how Abram, just gave the first choice to Lot and said, you have choice, and look over and just choose so our families can have peace, right? Abram just gave Lot that choice. Now look at what the Lord is telling Abram. Look as far as you can see in every direction, north, south, east, and west, and I am giving all this land as far as you can see to you and your descendants as a permanent possession. To think about that in the midst of a conflict that had just happened, and Abram, right, took the back seat and let someone else make the choice. And here God, in the midst of all that, in the midst of Abram's, possible discomfort here and just, oh man, what's happening? The Lord comes and comforts him, right? And look what he's saying about all this. This is awesome. As far as you can see, all this land that's around you, it's going to be a permanent possession to you and your descendants. Okay? That is awesome. And look how he continues on. He says, and I will give you so many descendants that, like the dust of the earth, they cannot be counted. So think about that. When, the Lord is working through Abram to build this family, this nation, this people that is going to represent him, right? And he's telling through this man Abram that the descendants, his descendants, are going to be, there's going to be so many, it's going to be like the dust of the earth that you can't even count how many there are. And that's a mind-blowing promise, also a prophecy for everything that's to come. And from this man here, like, wow, are you serious? You're going that many, And for us, all of us, like, this is a crazy thing. So think about that. In verse 17, go and walk through the land in every direction, for I am giving it to you. And then after that, what does Abram do? Right, when he moves his camp and everything and settles, there he built another altar to the Lord. So after all this, after the conflict internal with the family and everything, and then God comes and provides comfort, right? And then also, reassures him, gives us this promise, gives more detail of the promise to come, right? See how he's starting to give more layers of information about what is to come for him and this calling on his life. This is what's happening. So it's this land, everything that you see, this is going to be yours, and your descendants, they're going to be so many. It's not just 1, 2, 3, or 20. It is going to be so many that cannot even be counted. Okay? And so, Abram is giving back. He builds another altar to just solidify, to praise and worship the Lord, right, to strengthen that relationship with him. Such an awesome moment. Okay. And so here we go, folks. We're getting into chapter 14, and the title suggests Abram rescues Lot. Okay. Remember what we talked about, just previously, but the people of this area were extremely wicked and constantly sin. We felt like something was about to happen, and the title of this chapter, it tells us something's about to happen. And to be honest, I was contemplating, I was actually honestly just going to skip through this chapter. I was going to have you read through it, and then we were going to pick up in chapter 15. But there is actually something very, very important in here that I think if you just read through it, which honestly I had been doing that, instead of really diving in and studying it, there's something really big that's going to be missed, that much later on in the New Testament we can pick up on something absolutely incredible that right here in this chapter points to Jesus Christ. Okay, it's amazing. So here we go. Remember, they're in this region where it's just a lot of hostile environment and everything that's going on. It says war broke out in the region, and all these kings started a war against each other. We had this one side of kings that included the king of Babylonia, Elasar, Elam, and then we got they fought against Sodom, the king of Sodom, the king of Gomorrah, Admah, Seboim, and Bela. We've got these two groups that are going up against each other. Okay, and here in the midst of it all is our guy Lot, who decided to go and live, near Sodom, that area. Okay, and so these kings over here, Babylonia and all these, they were powerful. The kings of Sodom and Gomorrah, they were overtaken. Okay, that's the setup in a nutshell. And we pick up in verse 11 where it says, the victorious invaders then plundered Sodom and Gomorrah and headed for home, taking with them all the spoils of war and the food supplies. They also captured Lot, Abram's nephew who lived in Sodom, and carried off everything he owned. Okay, so look, what seemed like not a big deal, not such a huge decision when Abram said, choose Lot, you may choose any land, and he desired with his eyes this land because of its enticing, look to it, that desire and everything. And boom, here we go, that decision, getting close to a land that was surrounded by wickedness and evil and sin. And look at how it overtakes him, literally. Okay, so he was captured, he was in prison, everything he owned was carried off. Okay, look what the study Bible says. Lot's greedy desire for the best of everything led him into sinful surroundings. His burning desire for possessions and success cost him his freedom and enjoyment. And as a captive of one of the kings, he faced torture, slavery, or death. And in much the same way, we can be enticed into doing things or going places that we should not. The prosperity we long for is captivating. It can both entice us and enslave us if our motives are not in line with God's desires. That's a sermon right there. That's a great point, a great note that the study Bible brings up. The prosperity we long for is captivating. That desire. Remember how Satan approaches us. We just mentioned that a minute ago, right? And that desire, that lust, of our flesh like that, it can both entice us and enslave us. If our motives, if what's inside, if our motives are not in line with God's desires. Okay, so all of this takes place. Okay, and so Lot, boom, he's captured. Check out what happens. We think, oh man, this is it, just like Abram and what was going on back in Egypt with Pharaoh. Watch how God comes. It says Abram rescues Lot. Ooh, we're gonna see much deeper into the story. Says, but 13. But one of Lot's men escaped and reported. He went and reported everything to Abram. Verse 14, it says, when Abram heard that his nephew Lot had been captured, he mobilized the 318 trained men who had been born into his household. So notice that he mobilized 318 trained men. So, this gives us a little bit more into our guy Abram here. It's that he wasn't just going off into these foreign lands, right, and settling in these foreign places surrounded by Canaanites and Perizzite and all these different foreign people and whatnot, with the absolute possibility of being attacked, and everything like that. So everyone that was in his household, everyone that was born into his household, they were trained. What is this saying? That Abram, a man of wisdom, a man after God, was prepared, right, for every situation. And he trained men, right? He had his whole household and everyone in it absolutely prepared for when the moment came, if need be, to either protect themselves, to go out and fight, and to rescue someone. Okay? Being prepared for any type of situation that comes up. And it says, then he pursued he pursued the army until he caught up with them at Dan. Okay, and this is a long journey. If you check out a map from Hebron all the way up past Dan toward Damascus. I wish I could show you this, but if you look on a map, this wasn't just a quick, get out there, hurry up and get them back type of thing. This was a long journey. Okay, and it says in verse 15, there he divided his men and attacked during the night. And the army of the other king fled, but Abram chased them as far as Hobah, north of Damascus. And Abram recovered all the goods that had been taken, and he brought back his nephew Lot with his possessions and all the women and other captives. Wow, that's crazy, right? So think about that. There's a great sermon, in there. Okay, don't have time to go through that now, but just think about that. Reflect on that as you read through this. That a decision like that, where we place ourselves, and what we're surrounded by, that can eventually come and just absolutely strip us of everything. Okay? But hey, our man Abram, remember, God is ultimately in control of all this. Here comes his hands, and through his man, Abram going out, his trained, prepared household, and everyone goes out and rescues Lot, gets him out of captivity, along with everyone else, all the women and other captives, it says. Okay? So in verse 17, it says, after Abram returned from his victory over the king and all his allies, the king of Sodom went out to meet him in the valley of Shaveh, that is the king's valley. And Melchizedek, the king of Salem, and a priest of God Most High, brought Abram some bread and wine. And Melchizedek blessed Abram with this blessing. Time out. All right. So I want to point this out real quickly because Abram has just come back victorious, and he's there in the valley, Valley of Kings, King's Valley. And this man who we haven't heard anything of before just comes up out of the blue. This guy, this king of Salem, okay, Melchizedek. All right. So he's the king of Salem, which is early Jerusalem, right? The king of Salem, and a priest of God Most High. And he brought Abram some bread and wine. And then here he comes. He's going to bless Abram. Okay? And let's check out the blessing real quick, and then we'll point out some more things about this guy, right? Blessed be Abram by God Most High, creator of heaven and earth. And blessed be God Most High, who has defeated your enemies for you. Okay, very interesting there. So notice how one he says, "Blessed be Abram by God Most High, the Creator." He's acknowledging that he's the Creator of heaven and earth. Okay, and he's a priest of God Most High. And then he also in the same blessing says, "And blessed be God Most High, who has defeated your enemies for you." Okay. Ooh, that is very good. So we're gonna pick up on that here in the last part of this chapter, because then it goes on to say, "Then Abram gave Melchizedek a tenth of all the goods he had recovered." But the king of Sodom said to Abram, "Give back my people who were captured, but you may keep for yourself all the goods you have recovered." But Abram replied to the king of Sodom, "I solemnly swear to the Lord, God Most High, Creator of heaven and earth, that I will not take so much as a single thread or sandal thong from what belongs to you. Otherwise, you might say, I am the one who made Abram rich. I will accept only what my young warriors have already eaten, and I request that you give a fair share of the goods to my allies." Wow. So check this out. First things first, who is this Melchizedek guy? Okay, he shows up out of the blue, and we're like, okay, he is not mentioned again except for two other times, once in Psalms, and then two more times in Hebrews. Okay, he's actually got a whole chapter, in Hebrews chapter 7 that talks about him. It's like, who is this guy? And the reason, again, I was going to skip over this chapter, to be honest, but I wanted to bring this up because you absolutely have to highlight, circle, underline this guy right here. And I would suggest that you also do some studying into this, because one, he's the king of Salem, the early Jerusalem, and he's a priest of God Most High. This is the first time that we have heard anything like this. And he brings out to Abram some bread and wine, and then he also blesses Abram. And then poof, it's, that's it. So the study Bible says here, who was Melchizedek? He was obviously a God-fearing man, for his name means King of Righteousness. Melchizedek stands for King of Righteousness. And King of Salem means King of Peace. He was a priest of God Most High, which you'll find out in Hebrews chapter 7, that whole chapter 7. He recognized God as creator of heaven and earth. Okay. And it says what else is known about him. And once you start studying on this guy, if you just go and Google, type in, who is Melchizedek, King of Salem, it's probably going to come up with 4 different theories for you. And I know that this can start to get a little bit confusing, because it's just, honestly, it's a lot of speculation, because the only information that we have is what's here and then what's in Psalms, and then there's one quick verse in Psalms, and then what we have in Hebrews, and that's it. Okay, and I don't want you to get so much caught up in that aspect of it. I would like for you to just do a little bit of studying. Just when I say study, go refer to Hebrews. Go check out Hebrews chapter 5, verse 6 and verse 10. Go check out Hebrews, all of chapter 7, and just read about this. And when you do that, you're going to start to see how this moment right here is pointing us to Christ, something that seemingly has no connection, to Christ whatsoever. It is absolutely 100% pointing to Jesus Christ. And so that's why I wanted to bring this up, okay? Because one of the viewpoints about this, okay, is that Melchizedek was a type of Christ. Okay, and it talks about here, I love what this says. Instead of my explanation, it says a type Okay, when I say a type of Christ, it says a type is an Old Testament event or teaching that is so closely related to what Christ did that it illustrates a lesson about Christ. Okay? Now, having that thought with all of this, and once you go and read Hebrews and everything and you come back to this, you're going to see what that means. That it's going to expand this that much more, especially when we talk about a priest of God Most High. Oh, we're going to get into Exodus and Leviticus, where we're going to find all about this, how important this is, being at that level of priest of God Most High. Whew, man, that's something right there. Okay. And then the fact that he brought Abram some bread and wine. And how does this uh, parallel just symbolize and represent Jesus Christ? Bread is Christ's body, right? And wine is his blood, that we will find out later on in the New Testament. Such an amazing thing, and how he blesses Abram, in this moment. Okay. So I would love for you to do that, because when we talk about an event, a type is an Old Testament event or teaching that just so closely relates to Christ, and what he did for us while he was here, that it illustrates a lesson about him and is pointing us to him. So, guys, I'm telling you, everything that is happening in this Old Testament, when we talk about Adam and Eve and what took place, Cain and Abel, and how God accepted, him and his offering. And when we went to Noah and that whole symbolic representation, how that whole event was pointing us to Jesus Christ. It's giving us a piece of information about Christ, okay, pointing us to him in some small ways, in some absolutely massive ways. And again, this is one of those small things that we might just skip over, but please trust me, highlight this and wait and watch what happens with all this. It's such an amazing thing. Okay. And so when we got there to the end of the chapter, and it was, Abraham denying, king of Sodom, his offering to him and everything. Abram's like, no, I swear by God Most High, creator of heaven, I will not even take a single thread of what belongs to you, because otherwise you might say that I am the one who made you rich. Okay. And this is awesome what the study Bible says again about this part of it. Abram followed accepted tradition. However, he refused to take any of the recovered goods from the king of Sodom, even though this huge amount would significantly increase what he could have given to God. He chose to reject it for far more important reasons. He did not want the ungodly king, all right, that ungodly king of Sodom, to say, I am the one who made Abram rich. Instead, Abram wanted him to say, God has made Abram rich. In this case, accepting the gifts would have focused everyone's attention on Abram or the kingdom, or the king of Sodom, rather than on God, the giver of victory. Okay, so that is awesome, because Melchizedek and his blessing to Abram, you notice where he says that. He said, and blessed be God Most High, who has defeated your enemies for you. Okay, and here we go. It says Abram wanted that attention on God. He did not want anyone else to be able to say, especially this man who is wicked and evil, to be able to say, oh, I'm the one that made him rich. Abram wanted all of the attention to go to God, the giver of victory. Okay? And so when people look at us, I love this, they need to see what God has accomplished in our lives, what God has accomplished in our lives. If God is making our name, making our identity in him and everything, They need to see him instead of anything or everything that we are trying to put out there and present ourselves. Okay, we learned about that lesson with the Tower of Babel. Okay, and this is such an important thing, such a small thing, but so very important. So read through that. We are going to pick up in chapter 15. And guys, what is to come with all of this? And something a little bit later on, with Abram, and how everything that is taking place, all of these individuals, like this Melchizedek, this Abram, Lot, and Noah, how these individuals, how their lives are representing Jesus Christ. They're giving us a piece. It's like this. They are a type of Christ. They are illustrating something, telling us something about Christ, and it is the most amazing thing. What we are about to get to later on in a few chapters. So hang tight. Keep reading through, meditate, pray on this, and man, we'll see you guys in the next video.